December 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. 05:30 a.m. The air hangs heavy, smelling of frozen pine and the faint metallic tang of cold steel. Beneath a suffocating blanket of low cloud, the ground is an impossible maze of snow and shadows. For 3 days, the American line has fractured and the boast of an early victory in Europe has curdled into a bitter, panicked retreat. But here, in a freezing foxhole near a nameless road junction, one infantry squad knows the panic is about to stop. They are the eyes of the storm, and the storm is coming for them. The stillness is broken by a sound, not the distant rumble of artillery, but a closer, higher-pitched noise. A low-frequency thrum that grows, morphing from a vibration in the chest to a chorus of grinding treads. Panzers. The common myth of the Second World War fixates on the grand, imposing weaponry. The Tiger tanks, the B-17 flying fortresses, the 88 Mitterrahmer anti-aircraft guns. Yet this war was fundamentally won and lost in the mud by the humble foot soldier, and by the relentless invisible shield of firepower he carried. This is the story of that shield, the tool described by Lieutenant General J. Lawton Collins, a man who saw the war from the highest strategic level, as the American infantryman's greatest battle implement. It was not the massive, self-propelled gun, nor the sophisticated radar. It was the simple, reliable, and utterly unforgiving M1917 or M1919 Browning 30 caliber machine gun. What the German commanders pushing through the Ardennes did not fully comprehend was that the American war machine, unlike their own, was geared for an unbelievable expenditure of materiel. While the Wehrmacht doctrine prioritized the fast, decisive blitzkrieg punch, relying on elite troops and heavier individual weapons, the Allied strategy, especially the American one, was built on a principle of overwhelming, constant, and suppressive fire. This principle was personified by the 30 cal. When the first ghostly shape of a German patrol emerges from the gloom, the American corporal next to the M1919A4, nicknamed the Grinder by its crew, doesn't panic. He trusts the steel box resting on the low tripod, heavy, awkward, and demanding, but utterly dependable. This gun weighed nearly 40 pounds, almost twice the weight of the German equivalent, the legendary MG42. Yet, its very bulk was its strength. The German High Command scoffed at the Allied reliance on the 30 caliber, classifying it as an outdated medium-caliber weapon. They considered their MG42, firing the 7.92mm round at a staggering 200 rounds per minute, the famous Hitler's buzzsaw, to be the superior modern weapon. The MG42 aimed to kill with speed and shock. The American 30 cal, however, aimed to suppress. The distinction is critical. The American doctrine stated that if 90% of a target's rounds miss, but force the enemy to keep their heads down, that fire is 100% effective. The E-30 cal, with its massive, robust receiver, could fire continuously for hours, a reliability the water-cooled M1917 version pushed to the absolute limit. It was the industrial workhorse, not the exotic thoroughbred. A quote attributed to a captured German officer late in the war captures the shift in perception. "We could advance against the American rifles and their light machine guns. We could not advance against the rain that never stopped." He was referring to the sustained, non-stop volume of fire poured out by the M1919s. The secret lay in its design lineage, tracing back to John Browning's genius in the First World War. The 30 caliber was fundamentally a simple, tested, belt-fed system. It used the 30-06 Springfield round, the same as the Garand rifle, streamlining the logistical nightmare of a global war. But more importantly, it was built to last. The tolerances were looser, the parts heavier, designed to function perfectly whether covered in the fine dust of North Africa or the frozen mud of the Hurtgen forest. While the MG42 had a higher rate of fire, it had one fatal flaw. It was a masterpiece of sheet metal stamping, optimized for rapid assembly and high output, but demanding frequent, often frantic barrel changes. The Americans, with their deep industrial base, did not need to prioritize cheap construction. They prioritized endurance. As the German patrol closes in on the foxhole, the corporal loads the first 250-round canvas belt. The cold metal of the M1919 feels heavy, reassuring. He knows the weight means heat dissipation, and heat dissipation means he can keep firing while the Germans are forced to stop. The battle is not about who shoots fastest, it is about who shoots longest. This weapon was the heart of the American infantry square, the base of fire from which every tactical movement launched. It dictated the pace of the fight. It transformed an advance into a crawl, a flanking maneuver into an impossible charge, and a position into a fortress. The German soldiers were about to learn that the sound of the buzzsaw was terrifying, but the persistent, methodical hiss of the 30 cal was what truly broke the will of the Wehrmacht. The corporal pushes the first round into the breach. He waits for the officer's command, his thumb resting on the spade grip. The time for retreat is over. The time for industrial suppression has begun. Don't miss the rest of this story. How the 30 caliber defined the American infantryman's experience and why it became the silent killer of the Wehrmacht morale. Subscribe and hit the notification bell now so you don't miss Chapter 2, where we dive into the machine that fed the beast, the logistics of total war. The decision by the U.S. Ordnance Department to standardize the 30-06 round for both the primary rifle, the M1 Garand, and the primary medium machine gun, the M19-19 Browning, was arguably one of the most brilliant strategic decisions of the war. It was a logistical singularity. Every squad was a mobile, self-sufficient fire team, sharing ammunition across their M1 Garands, M1903 Springfields, often used by snipers, and the crucial M1919. This uniformity was the true meaning of industrial might applied to the battlefield. The sheer scale of this industrial output is staggering. By the end of the war, American factories had produced over 4 million M1 Garands, but they also churned out hundreds of thousands of M1919 variants. More important than the guns themselves were the billions of rounds of ammunition. American production was not measured in thousands or even millions, but in tonnage. It was the doctrine of overkill built into the supply chain. For the American machine gun crew, the burden was immense. While the Germans had their light, fast MG-34 and later the MG-42, which could theoretically be operated by one man, the M1919 doctrine demanded a minimum crew of 3. There was the gunner, the assistant gunner, responsible for feeding the belt and changing barrels, and the ammunition bearer. Their shared load was punishing: the 40-pound gun, the 10-pound tripod, and critically, the ammunition. Each 250-round belt of 30-06 weighed approximately 15 pounds. A standard combat load was often 1,000 rounds, or 60 pounds of just ammunition distributed among the crew. In the mud-caked reality of the Western Front, this weight was a constant complaint. "We cursed that damn heavy gun every mile we marched," recalled Sergeant Ted Hurlbut of the 4th Infantry Division. "We hated the weight, the tripod, the heat, but when the shooting started, that heavy piece of steel was the only thing standing between us and a cemetery." The strategy of continuous fire, the strategic genius of the 30 cal, was that the American command could afford to waste ammunition. The German MG-42, despite its terrifying output, had to be used sparingly in many sectors due to endemic supply shortages, especially later in the war. Every round was precious. For the Americans, the order was often simply fire and maintain suppression. This difference fundamentally changed the psychological landscape of the war. An American advance was often prefaced by minutes of deafening, sustained M1919 fire, pouring rounds into suspected enemy positions, not necessarily to kill, but to pin them down. This allowed the riflemen to maneuver, to advance, to get close enough to finish the job with grenades or the M1 Garand. The perspective from the foxhole. A journal entry from a German grenadier in the Hürtgen forest provides a chilling counterpoint. The Americans do not fight. They simply fire. We hear the heavy, slow clack-clack-clack of their machine guns, and it never stops. Hour after hour. They treat their bullets like water. It is not possible to raise your head. It is not possible to breathe. You simply wait for the moment of silence, and that silence never comes. This rain of fire led to a crippling psychological effect. The American soldier, knowing the logistical tail stretched back thousands of miles across the Atlantic, felt supported. He knew the next belt, the next box was always coming. The German soldier fighting on the defensive felt the squeeze of the tightening noose, knowing that every belt spent was a belt unlikely to be replaced. The M1919 also excelled in its flexibility. It was mounted on the Jeep as a light anti-aircraft or convoy defense weapon, the M3 half-track as a primary forward defense gun, the M4 Sherman tank as the coaxial and hull machine gun, the M117 tripod for stationary defense. This ubiquity meant that no matter where the American infantryman turned, the familiar, reliable shape of the Browning was there, ready to lay down its suppressing blanket of lead. It was the backbone of the mobile fighting force, ensuring that the infantry always had a powerful, belt-fed deterrent against light vehicles and massed enemy attacks. The .30 caliber, in its simple, rugged design, was the perfect expression of American industrial strategy: overwhelming force, standardized logistics, and absolute reliability. It was the material basis for the simple but devastating tactical instruction given to every GI: find 'em, fix 'em, and flank 'em. The .30 cal's job was to fix them, to pin the enemy in place, and it did so with a relentless industrial appetite for ammunition that the Wehrmacht could never match. The tactical use of the machine gun is a study in geometry. It is not the simple act of pointing and shooting, but the precise application of cones of fire, beaten zones, and limiting angles. The German army perfected the use of the MG42 for plunging fire and grazing fire, making wide open ground lethal. However, their machine gun crews were frequently exposed and, by 1944, often lacked the veteran support to sustain their speed against a determined defense. The American doctrine, built around the M1919, was less about speed and more about saturation and control. The sustained fire capability of the heavy Browning allowed for a deeper beaten zone, the area where the bullets consistently land. Because the M1919, especially when mounted on the heavy M1917 tripod, was incredibly stable, its crew could maintain a tight, continuous pattern of fire at ranges up to 1,000 yards. This was true suppressive fire, not merely harassing fire. The M1919 transformed the American squad into a miniature fortress. As the squad leader positioned the M1919, he was drawing a lethal line in the dirt. Anything crossing that line would be met with 500 rounds per minute of T-30 Aero-6. The remaining riflemen would then position themselves to cover the machine gun, creating a self-reinforcing cell of defense. The reliability of the M1919 became a legend among the American GIs and a terror to the Germans. In the infamous fighting of the Hürtgen Forest, where visibility was measured in feet and the mud swallowed men whole, the heavy machine gun was often the only thing that functioned reliably. It was heavy, yes, but its massive construction shrugged off the mud, water, and freezing temperatures that jammed lighter, more finely tuned weapons. A chilling post-war interview with a Waffen-SS veteran who fought against the 28th Infantry Division highlighted this distinction. "We feared the American heavy artillery, that is certain, but when we had to assault a fixed position, it was the sound of the .30 cal that brought us to a stop. The MG42 sounds like it is tearing cloth. It is sharp, shocking. The Browning sounds like a man beating a large drum, slow, steady, and inevitable. You think it is only 500 rounds per minute, we can run through that. But you are wrong. It does not stop for a barrel change. It does not jam in the rain. It simply continues until your entire company is laying flat, unable to move a finger." The effect was not just physical, but psychological. The relentless nature of the .30 cal fire was a direct assault on the German soldiers' will to fight, especially in the later stages of the war. By late 1944, the experienced, fanatical Wehrmacht was being replaced by the Volksgrenadier divisions, less trained, younger, and far more brittle. These green troops, often boys of 16 or veterans pulled from desk jobs, were trained to charge into the gap created by the lightning-fast fire of their MG42s. When faced with the endless, methodical suppression of the American M1919, their will quickly shattered. The inability to raise one's head, to maneuver, to even sight a rifle, turned the battlefield into a claustrophobic trap. They were not being killed outright. They were being suffocated by lead. Consider the summer fighting in Normandy, 1944. The dense hedgerows, bocage, turned the campaign into a series of brutal short-range ambushes. The MG42 was deadly in this terrain, but its exposed barrel change mechanism was a weakness. The M1919, often mounted on a pintle on an M2 half-track or truck, could pour continuous fire into a hedgerow before the infantry assault began. This was the strategic brilliance J. Lawton Collins saw. The E-30 Cal was the perfect tool for a grinding war of attrition fought by an army with unlimited resources. It didn't need to be the fastest or the lightest. It needed to be the most persistent. It was the hammer that held the nail down, while the M1 Garand and the bar delivered the final decisive blows. The 130 Cal was the geometry of suppression, turning the European battlefield into a relentless meat grinder, where the only path to safety was retreat or surrender. February 1945. The Roer River crossing, Germany. The war is technically in its twilight, but the fighting remains as vicious as ever. American forces are pushing for the final crossing into the German heartland. The German defense is fanatical, clinging to every last house and embankment. At the edge of the industrial town of Jülich, the 9th Infantry Division encounters a devastating defensive pocket. The Germans have sighted 2 MG42s in the rubble of a concrete bunker, their interlocking fields of fire, making the open ground of the riverbank a kill zone. The infamous buzzsaw fire rips through the air, sending up sprays of concrete and turning every dash into a gamble with death. The American advance is halted, pinned by the speed of the German fire, approximately 2,400 rounds per minute combined. The German gunners, hardened veterans, know they cannot hold forever, but their mission is to extract the highest price possible. This is the moment when the war's two different philosophies of firepower come face to face. The American lieutenant calls for the support of the heavy machine gun platoon, bringing up 2 M1917A1 water-cooled Brownings. These are the original heaviest beasts of the Browning family, their water jackets making them capable of firing literally for hours without overheating. They are bulky, slow to deploy, and utterly terrifying when active. The order given is simple: sustained fire for 20 minutes. The M1917A1 gunners set their sights, not aiming to destroy the bunker immediately, but to create an inescapable curtain of lead over the German firing slits. The 2 Brownings open up. The sound is not the frantic tearing of the MG42. It is a deep, rhythmic, almost mechanical drumming, a sound of industrial inevitability. For the first 5 minutes, the German MG42s try to fight back, their tracers flashing out in desperate bursts. But the American fire is too accurate, too continuous, and too overwhelming. The M1917s are pouring an estimated 1,000 rounds per minute onto the tiny bunker openings. Every time a German gunner tries to adjust his sight or reload, the heavy, stable Browning fire blankets his position. At the 12-minute mark, one of the German MG42s falls silent. The reason is mechanical. The intense, high-speed output of the MG42 requires frequent barrel changes to prevent the rifling from being destroyed. In the chaos and panic of the siege, the crew cannot safely change the glowing barrel. They are pinned by the American fire, unable to move a muscle. Their weapon, the buzzsaw, is effectively useless, overheating, its crew paralyzed. The second MG42 continues for another 3 minutes until it too is forced into silence. The truth of the Wehrmacht was exposed. Their technology, while elegant and fast, was not built to withstand the sustained industrial assault of the Allied war machine. The M1919 and M1917 required heavy logistics, but they delivered the unstoppable, continuous fire that proved strategically decisive. When the American infantry finally charged the bunker, flanking the position while the M1917s maintained their unrelenting stream of rounds above their heads, they found the 2 German gunners huddled in the corner. They had not been hit by the 30 cal fire, but they were defeated nonetheless. Their weapons were silent, one with a jammed, molten barrel, the other with an empty ammo tray, the crew unable to reach their reserve. General Collins's assessment was proven true on that cold German riverbank. The M1919's purpose was not to kill individuals with flair, but to destroy the enemy's cohesion. The duel of steel had concluded. The fast, elegant, but fragile German machine had been defeated by the heavy, reliable, and relentless American workhorse. The .30 caliber was the true engine of attrition. The Second World War was a conflict of extremes, a dance between massed men and hyper-efficient killing machines. Yet when the historians search for the instrument that truly won the ground war for the American infantry, the answer always returns to the silent workhorse, the M1919 and M1917 Browning, 30 caliber machine guns. Its impact extended far beyond the battlefield. The reliability and standardization of the 30-06 ammunition was a masterclass in military engineering that shaped future conflicts. The gun itself, in various forms, served the United States and its allies for decades, remaining a primary weapon well into the Korean and Vietnam Wars, a testament to the perfection of John Browning's original design. The .30 caliber eventually gave way to the M60 machine gun and the 7.62 NATO round, but its tactical legacy remains profound. It established the core American doctrine, superior firepower saves lives. Every squad leader today understands that the ability to lay down continuous suppressive fire is the key to movement and victory. The Grinder taught the American military that logistics and reliability trumped speed and lightness when the stakes were the total destruction of an enemy force. The true victory of the .30 cal was less in the number of kills it achieved and more in the number of American lives it saved. Its suppressing fire provided the crucial seconds of cover that allowed medics to reach the wounded, engineers to place charges, and riflemen to find the perfect flanking position. It was the noisy, heavy, but ultimately protective shield of the GI. In the words of General Collins, the greatest battle implement was not a weapon that promised lightning-fast victory, but one that guaranteed endurance. It was the physical embodiment of the American commitment to outproduce, outsupply, and outfight the enemy through sheer industrial determination. This simple, robust piece of steel, often overlooked in the grand chronicles of the war, was the reason the German grenadier spent more time cowering than shooting. It was the reason the American advance, though bloody and slow, was ultimately unstoppable. The M1919 Browning, 30 caliber machine gun, the quiet hero that hammered the Wehrmacht into submission, one perfectly placed, relentless round at a time. Thank you for watching. If this deep dive into the technology and human drama of World War II captured your interest, please subscribe to the channel and share this video. Your support allows us to continue bringing these untold stories and technical truths of history to light.